My name is Bernd Niedermeier and I'm responsible for sales at Tuxera for the automotive market in EMEA. Together we will have a look at flash memory challenges in automotive systems in the future and see how to deal with them. Now, a message coming across is that soon in automotive systems, in autonomous driving systems, the memory requirements will go from 1 terabyte and even beyond. Now, that is substantial, but what does it really mean? What does it mean in comparison to the past? And how does that develop in the future? Now, how were systems being comprised in the past? In the past and up to now, we still are seeing ECUs based on AUTOSAR, not really complex operating systems in there. Then we do see IVI systems, which traditionally have been very much powered by operating systems like QNX, or nowadays very much in Linux. And then in instrument clusters, we are seeing operating systems like Greenhills or even Linux nowadays as well. The one thing all those systems up to now had in common is that they were kind of closed systems and considered to be read-only. You were flashing them once for production and then there were literally no updates at all, or maybe a few updates that didn't really count. With regard to the flash memory and its capability to only take a certain amount of write cycles, it didn't really matter. So you didn't have to care about it at all. Now, what are we facing today? Today we are facing more and more consolidated ECUs. What does that mean? We're talking about hypervisors with different domains running on those hypervisors, meaning an instrument cluster, an IVI system, different operating systems in parallel, and even tier ones and OEMs having their own domain with an operating system where they are building their applications on. Now, again, all those different domains, they are sharing the same physical memory. And that is making things a bit different, especially if we are introducing systems like Android with the applications that are running on those systems. Meaning that those new services offerings from OEMs, and you all might have read that OEMs want to introduce services when the car is already on the street to then again sell something, earn money with it. Together with Android apps, who knows what app is going to be running on the system in 5 years from now? And what is it doing with the flash memory then? So there's a couple of risks coming from that. And risk number one is flash memory wear out. The number of write cycles being completely consumed, meaning that the system would fail. And that's a completely different case in automotive, where we do have a lifetime of 10 to 15 years compared to a mobile phone where we only have 2 to 4 years of a lifetime. If after 6 years in automotive a system should fail, then it's going to be very, very expensive for the user. It's outside of the warranty period, yes, but to get your head unit replaced, you might have to spend 3,000 euros. Not a nice user experience, of course, and could be a big damage in reputation for the OEM, because the used car market will have an impact as well when people are writing on different web forums, hey, don't buy that car as a used car because in 1 or 2 years from now you will have to spend 3,000 euros on getting your head unit replaced because it will fail. So nothing we can really afford. On the other hand, for the system engineer, a couple of other questions come up. What memory to choose for the future? Should I choose an SLC device, which is taking over 100,000 write cycles, but happens to be the most expensive memory choice, which normally doesn't meet the budget in those systems? Or do I have the chance to go towards an MLC or TLC device, which are much cheaper, but only can withstand maybe something around 100,000 write cycles in total? A different strategy people are using is also, let's say, if your system only requires 64 gigabyte of memory, then you could install 256, which gives you a lot of headroom for all the wear level balancing in order not to have your memory wear out. But the question is, 256 gigabyte versus 64 is more expensive. Is that still meeting the budget or not? If we talk about write cycles, then we often see the word write amplification factor. What does write amplification factor mean? Well, basically it describes the phenomenon that if you, let's say, want to write 1 byte of data, then you won't end up writing 1 byte into the memory. So you will end up writing much more. And that is a little bit dependent on the application, the file system, all the things being involved in the overall system, where you will end up with much more write cycles than you actually intended at the very first place. And here's a small illustration how that could add up. In the application itself, depending on whether you have a random sequential write, which is most likely for real applications, or a pure random write or a pure sequential write, the application itself and the way it handles the data and transports the data will introduce a write amplification. Now, the file system, whatever it is, takes that information, handles it in some way, and will forward it to the flash controller. That will introduce another write amplification. And the controller itself, which doesn't know anything about what's going on here from a logical perspective, but very well understands the physical aspects of the flash memory cells, that again writes then into the memory cells, but again some write amplification occurs. And that could add up quite significantly, where your write cycles might be consumed much earlier than anticipated. Now, there's another risk, and there I would like to ask the question, does anybody really remember fragmentation? Sure we do, but we forgot about it, because a long time it was considered to be just a mechanical problem. And even for traditional hard disks, we didn't have to care about it anymore. But to be honest, it is still an issue in memory systems, specifically in flash memory systems, and this has been investigated in mobile phone studies, and we will see a couple of results just here. Now, with regard of mobile phones, with fragmentation, what happens after a certain time, maybe maximum 1 year, there will be a performance slowdown of factor 2 to 5. Something many of us might have experienced with our own phones. And we were thinking, yeah, the app now consumes more processor power, so it's time for a new phone, right? No, simply the memory is fragmented and drops the performance that way. The other thing with regard of starting an application is factor of 2 getting slower compared to a phone fresh out of the box. Now with a phone, this is kind of annoying. But let's take a look at another picture where it illustrates the real impact a little bit better. Now, what we're seeing here is actually an out-of-the-box phone and 1 year in use. And the important thing to notice is that for sequential read, the performance from almost 400 megabytes per second goes down to 300 megabytes per second. So this is really a 30% drop. And it's even worse for sequential write, where it goes down from 120 megabytes to 20 megabytes. So some of us might have seen that happening. But what does it mean for automotive? Let's take a look at a demo. We did a comparison between a Linux Android ext4 performance from a file system and our very own Velocity FS file system, which has been optimized for flash memories. And at the very beginning, we could see, okay, things are starting to fill up, and after a certain time, we can see on the left side that fragmentation, based on how the picture looks, is clearly to be identified, whereas on the right side, although there is also fragmentation happening, but it's not that bad. And when we take a look at where it starts at the beginning, literally a little bit dependent on the use case, one could say at the very beginning the systems are kind of similar. Not really a big difference when they fill up the system. But at the end, the difference is substantial. We are ending up with half the write speed for the camera And when we talk about camera, what we did here is to simulate a 4-camera stream that's getting recorded into flash memory. And yeah, 50% drop of performance, that is really significant. We can also see that in a different representation where the flash optimized file system actually, with regard to the performance, stays pretty much constant, and the other system, the open source system, after a short time already starts to slowly decrease in performance. And you remember we talked about the right amplification factor, which goes very much in line with that, or is also a root cause for the performance to drop, that the right amplification factor suddenly increases significantly over time, whereas with a flash optimized file system, it stays pretty much constant and low. Now, talking about such performance drops, if we take a look at infotainment systems, then a performance drop is maybe considered to be annoying because it goes into the user experience, the navigation route takes longer to be calculated, another app maybe takes longer to start, so it's not really critical, but not that nice. But if we think about other systems in the car, like the instrument cluster, or even more functional safety critical systems like ADAS, then such performance drops, and let them only be 20%, they have a chance to completely let the system fail. And that is something, of course, nobody can afford. And such effects have been, by some people, already been watched, and some people are still to learn about it, and hopefully not learn it the hard way when the cars are in the market already. So what else, or what can file systems really affect? Because often what we see is, if somebody is aware about a problem, yes, I need to care a little bit more about the flash memory, then people are asking the question maybe, oh, where is that flash device going to be available that can do 1 million write cycles, but is only 10 cents at 256 gigabytes? And maybe you will wait forever for that. And people don't really understand that the file system can make a difference in that arena as well. It has an impact on the read-write performance, on data integrity, on the flash endurance, and on interoperability as well. Fragmentation, we have seen that. Out of the box open source systems, what has been seen is they become rapidly fragmented, the speed decreases, the latency increases, and increased latency means that frames might be lost. That's actually one of the reasons why for camera vendors we are also selected to be the very reliable partner there, because those guys hate that their customers experience frame drops or frame losses. We do see higher write amplification factors with out-of-the-box open source systems, and also, not unimportant for many systems, a longer boot time. So if a file system is optimized for the flash memory, then we can address those disadvantages, resulting into longer lifetime of the flash memory, higher performance, and shorter boot time. And the file system from Tuxera is called Velocity FS, which is really optimized for flash memory, is a high performance data storage support for the internal flash memory. And the nice side effect for that is that Velocity FS is available for all kind of different operating systems, which is Linux, QNX, Android, Green Hills Integrity, and also soon PikeOS. And this again is something where the development community has a big advantage, where some of the people on their workstation in Linux or Windows create an SD card and then go to the target system, where on the one hand they have the QNX system, on the other hand they have the Linux system, and they want to exchange data using that SD card. And today that is not really easy, because QNX normally can read ext4 from Linux, but it cannot write it. On the other hand, Linux does not understand QNX specific file systems at all. With introducing Velocity FS on all those different platforms, we do have the chance to have one file system which can be handled by every single operating system, including the workstation that the developer is developing on. So what should be done? Now, one really should think about an intelligent file system to cope with the challenges of the future. Beginning with the application, one should try to lay out the files as logically as possible, because that always will help. And defragmentation as the last measure always is an option, but of course it has to be used very carefully, because if you use it on a daily basis, then you might reduce the number of write cycles still available quite significantly. So I hope this was an interesting journey into some of the aspects of flash memory challenges in the future, and with that I would like to thank you.